Antony Blinken will be striking a strong contrast to the situation in the Chinese capital 1 year ago when he travels to Beijing as anticipated in the upcoming days. This will be the first visit to China by a U.S. Secretary of State since 2018. A no-limits alliance between the two neighbors was then announced by Chinese leader Xi Jinping as he welcomed Russian President Vladimir Putin for the opening of the Beijing Olympics. The two leaders met for talks and supper in Putin's honor. Chinese leaders would not back down from that statement weeks later when Russian tanks moved across the border into Ukraine, beginning an invasion that would wreak havoc and spark a humanitarian crisis. Beijing refused to criticize Moscow while maintaining its neutrality in the crisis and its ignorance of Moscow's intentions in advance. Instead, it repeated Kremlin talking points that NATO was to blame for starting the conflict, further rupturing ties with both Europe and the US. The contrast of a Blinken return a year later would not be by chance. To regain lost ground and normalize its ties after being economically depleted by its now abandoned zero-COVID plan, observers claim Beijing has been relaxing its foreign policy stance and stepping up its diplomacy with Western nations. Chinese counterparts are likely to emphasize their long-standing calls for a peaceful resolution and play up what they claim is China's objective and impartial position on the conflict in meetings with Blinken during his anticipated early February trip, as well as meetings with European leaders who have indicated they may visit in the coming months, analysts say. Even while the appearances may be different from this time last year, China's support for Russia, as seen in its yearly commerce, diplomatic interactions, and joint military exercises program, is quite different. These indicators demonstrate that China has not backed down from its no-limits partnership over the past year. This partnership has grown stronger in recent years, and according to analysts, Beijing continues to view it as essential to achieving its core objectives of preserving national security and resisting a U.S.-led international order. According to Alexander Gabu, a senior scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, China is very skilled in calibrating the narrative depending on the audience. But he continued, "I don't see any buyer's remorse when it comes to China's relations with Russia following the conflict in Ukraine. Rather, China is helping itself to the opportunities that this crisis provides." Worldwide partner. The administration of U.S. President Joe Biden has warned the Chinese government of potential repercussions for any financial backing for Putin's invasion since the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine. The U.S. has recently expressed concerns with China regarding information showing state-owned Chinese enterprises may have sold Russia non-lethal technology, a claim Beijing adamantly refutes. U.S. intelligence officials have continuously stated they have not found any evidence China delivered deadly help to Russia. While a small number of Chinese businesses have been added to U.S. blacklists in connection with the conflict, it appears that the majority have adjusted their operations to avoid breaking the severe sanctions imposed by the U.S. and its allies against Moscow. Long emphasizing its desire to play a constructive role in a peaceful resolution of the dispute, Beijing acknowledged at a meeting with Putin in September that it had raised questions and concerns about the situation. However, China has continued to increase trade with its northern neighbor, opening for the first time 2 permanent bridges to allow a trade to cross a crucial border river and generating a record 1.28 trillion yuan, $190 billion last year, according to Chinese figures released last month. That represented an increase of about 30% from 2021, partly due to Chinese businesses buying coal and oil at deep discounts even as other governments attempted to boycott Russian fuel and carry rising energy costs to avoid supporting Russia. During her usual end-of-year meeting, Xi complimented Putin on the increased trade figures and urged the two nations to enhance strategic coordination and continue to be each other's development opportunity and global partner. Since the start of the conflict, Xi and Putin have had at least 4 separate contacts, including one face-to-face meeting. The two spoke in December by video link. During that period, Xi has not yet spoken with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky despite the latter's open interest. A concern among America's Asian allies is the link between China and Russia in terms of security. In recent months, China has sent over 2,000 soldiers to Russia for a cooperative exercise, sent strategic airplanes to patrol alongside Russian aircraft over the Sea of Japan and the East China Sea, and sent several ships to participate in combined naval drills with live fire that lasted a week in waters close to Japan. In a meeting on Tuesday in Tokyo, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and visiting NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg expressed worry over Russia's growing military cooperation with China, including joint operations and drills near Japan. Jean-Pierre Cabestan, an emeritus professor at Hong Kong Baptist University's Department of Government and International Studies, claims that even though those engagements and China's expanding trade and diplomacy may have increased skepticism about the China-Russia relationship in the West, they continue to serve as the cornerstone of China's overall foreign policy. Russia also plays a significant role in enhancing China's influence at the UN. In terms of China's external interests, the relationship with Russia is more advantageous because it is directed against the United States and its alliance structures in both Europe and Asia, he said. The major goal of China is to undermine those alliance arrangements. Charm is impolite. China has reportedly taken steps to tone down its general language toward the West and restructure its diplomacy as it pushes for economic recovery in the wake of one of its worst yearly economic performances in nearly half a century, analysts claim. The significance of its relationship with Russia may not have changed, though. Yun Sun, head of the China program at the Stimson Center think tank in Washington, stated that the economic recovery of China was the country's top priority. Yun Sun added that maintaining a stable relationship with the United States was necessary for China's economic recovery. That's contributing to this charm offensive, she added, pointing out that this is probably only a temporary tactic as China attempts to revive its sagging economic development rather than a fundamental rethinking of Beijing's aggressive foreign policy. The change in tone and diplomatic outreach will be closely monitored by Western nations to see if it has any bearing on the conflict in Ukraine. The Ukraine war is anticipated to be one of the main topics of discussion for Blinken during the visit, who is anticipated to arrive in China shortly after a largely cordial face-to-face meeting between Biden and Xi at the Group of 20 in November. Analysts predict that the secretary would reiterate previous American cautions against aiding Russia's war operations while also keeping an eye out for any possibilities for Beijing to persuade Moscow to seek peace. This is a school of thought that has emerged in Europe, where politicians like French President Emmanuel Macron, who also plans to visit China shortly, have voiced optimism that Beijing will play such a role. Analysts, though, remain dubious. According to Gabu of the Carnegie Endowment, China is very carefully feeding these misconceptions that it can exert pressure on Putin to end the conflict. However, Beijing will still be well aware that the causes of the tensions and difficulties in its dealings with Western powers go much deeper than worries over its connection with Russia, he said. China may attempt to capitalize on this perception while limiting expectations to get some goodwill, he added. As a result, hopes that China may assist the West in ending the conflict, a solution that Beijing has also urged for, are likely to reach its upper limit. You will never see a scenario where China abandons Russia, says Sun, because in China's dictionary, if Russia stands to fall, China is next. The first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine was last week. Tens of billions of dollars worth of military aid from the United States and Ukraine's other Western allies has been given to Kyiv to aid in its defense against the Russian invasion. According to Russia, Western intervention has only served to exacerbate the situation. On February 26, Putin accused NATO members of taking part in the conflict by providing weapons. They are providing Ukraine weaponry worth tens of billions of euros. This is participation, Putin remarked in a Russia One channel interview. Did you like it? Tell us what you think of the video in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe.